Most of us will be affected by cancer in some way over the course of our lives, but what would it be like to know you carried a gene that predisposed you to the disease? This is the reality for our next guest, the family members that came before her, and the many who will come after.
Her latest book is Daughter of Family G, a memoir of cancer genes, love, and fate. In it, she unpacks her family's legacy of hereditary cancer in a true story of loss, resilience, and survival, while coming to terms with the hand that she's been dealt. Please welcome to the show, author Ami McKay.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for being here. So this gene mutation, it's known as Lynch syndrome, and it dates back to 1895, which means that your family has been the subject of the longest and most detailed cancer genealogy in history, in the world.
That's right, yeah.
So what does it mean for somebody to carry this gene?
So Lynch syndrome is a genetic disorder that predisposes the carrier to an elevated risk, an extreme elevated risk for certain kinds of cancer at an earlier than average age. And those cancers include colorectal cancer, gastric cancer, pancreatic cancer, and for women specifically, endometrial cancer and ovarian cancer.
Okay. Wow. So once a test was developed to detect the gene, you were one of the very first people to take that test.
That's right.
And I think some people might think, well, wouldn't it be better to kind of just sort of maybe be in the dark? But what made you decide that you wanted to take it?
Oh, well, yeah, ignorance can be bliss, absolutely. And I totally sympathize with people who, you know, have that kind of reaction that they would rather just turn away. But the test was actually made from my mom's DNA because she had participated in medical research and specifically cancer research. And so she was really vying for me to take the test. And so, taking the test means being able to be proactive. It means knowing for sure that I am at that risk and then being able to take the steps to be tested on an annual basis for different screenings, including colonoscopies and other kinds of screenings. So it really, after a while, after I kind of grappled with the emotional implications of it, which were going to be difficult, it's much easier to find a polyp at an early stage than it is to cure stage 4 cancer. Yeah.
And Amy, you call yourself a previver, basically living in this liminal space between wellness and cancer. So how does being a previver change the way you live from day to day?
Well, on the outset, when I first got the results, it was a bit overwhelming, But my mom, in her wisdom, she said, well, you're the same person today as you were yesterday. You just know something more about yourself. And this particular knowledge is knowledge that my family had fought for generations, to have clinical proof that it's in our DNA, that we need to have these tests. There's no more begging for colonoscopies or for doctors to take this seriously. We had proof. So being a previver means I can be proactive in that way. It also meant some big decisions. I had a prophylactic hysterectomy in my early 40s to keep myself from having the gynecological cancers that are associated with it. But it also meant, for me anyway, embracing the present, finding the joy in life and going after my dreams and imparting that to other people around me and sharing kindness and connection and not waiting to do those things. And so, as hard as some of the emotional terrain is, it's been a real gift.
When you talk about the difficulty of that day-to-day, it's, once you know that you have this syndrome, how do you not become almost like a hypochondriac where it's like every ache, every pain, ooh, what's that? Ooh, and then not obsess over the idea of a potential illness. So how do you manage that day-to-day?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because it isn't always easy. I mean, there are times when, I can remember specifically waking up in the middle of the night with night sweats and, thinking, is this a gallbladder attack? Is this colon cancer? What is it? Googling, which you shouldn't, don't go there. But then also because I have this knowledge and because I have lived with this now since 2001, when I was first tested, stepping back, taking a minute and thinking, when was the last time I had a colonoscopy? Things were clear, things were good. Do I have any other symptoms? No, I'm good. I just need to be vigilant, but not a hypochondriac. But also having a support system, having a family who is there and understanding of that and able to kind of hold you up when those moments do come, because they inevitably do. And then, again, finding those moments of joy and bliss and hanging on to that, and knowing that I have this knowledge to move forward.
So let's talk about finding moments of joy and bliss and family, because as I mentioned, this research has been going on since 1895, and the first doctor to study your family's gene was Dr. Aldred Worthen, right? And he used the studies, he used the findings to sort of make recommendations and also spread his eugenic principles. And so he was actually recommending to your ancestors, don't get married, don't have children. So did you have to work through that kind of a decision? Because you do have kids.
Right, yeah. So fortunately, by the time I came around, that part of the story had been somewhat put to rest, right? I mean, I can look at my family tree, which I traced for this book, and I went all the way back into those generations, and I can see in the extended family where the family lines end of certain members, where they took that to heart, and they just said, that's it. You know, Time magazine in 1936 came out with an article that kind of said this family should call it curtains. And that's a hard thing to take. But fortunately, I come from a line that didn't buy into that. My great-great-grandmother, Tilly, was the first family member, and even in the extended family, to undergo cancer surgery and to survive and then to live. And she didn't just do it once, she did it twice. And that was in the early 1930s. And that was a game changer for us, because she said, no, I'm not going to buy into that philosophy. And eugenics was very prevalent in the United States at that time. The government was using it to make laws to limit immigration, to have discriminatory practices of people they deemed unfit, including cancer patients, but also, you know, considering race and people who were differently abled. And so there was a lot of kind of hysteria going around about it, but she wouldn't take that for an answer. She said, no way. And her favorite saying was, all the flowers of all our tomorrows are in the seeds we plant today. And so no matter how long your life was going to last, and it didn't even necessarily have to do with cancer, you know, you got to embrace it. Yeah.
Well, let's keep talking about that, because you are a mother of 2 kids.
Yeah, 2
And
boys.
this, as a carrier of this gene, there's a 50% chance you will pass that on to your kids.
Right.
So how have the conversations surrounded this in your family?
Oh, yeah. Well, they were young when I was first diagnosed. So they were 8 and 1, just wee ones. Yeah, there they are. And I didn't want to hide anything from them. My mother and even my grandmother never hid anything from me when we were talking about this lineage of cancer. That's one way to combat the fears that come with it. And so I was very open with them. And I remember my 8-year-old being very excited at the time that a doctor could look inside my guts when I went in for my first screening. And so, you know, in that aspect, I tried to be very positive about it, to say that this is part of life and it could be part of your life, but not to scare them, so that when they came to be an age to have a choice to get tested, that they would be able to make healthy choices. And of course, it would be their own choice that they would get tested or not. And so, yeah, I just really tried to stay very healthy about it. It's hard, though, because with that chance, waiting for their genetic test was way harder than waiting for mine. There's a level of, I'm not going to lie, there's guilt that comes with those feelings if a test is positive. But again, we're so fortunate that we can know these things, that we can be proactive.
You say knowledge is power, and one of the statistics that really stood out in your book was this one, and you say that 1 out of 279 people have Lynch syndrome. Only 5% of people are ever tested for it. So you've got this platform, we're all listening. What do we need to know to protect ourselves?
Yeah, so even recent statistics say that it might be as prevalent as 1 in 125.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think the message here is not to make people afraid, but, you know, Thanksgiving's coming up, to sit down with your family, and while you're talking about your roots and maybe talking about family trees, I'm a big genealogy geek, you know, I overlaid the medical history with that. And you can do that. And if you start to see these patterns of cancer in your family, you should go and talk to your family doctor about that, and they can connect you with a genetic counselor who can lead you on a path to the right kind of testing, not just Lynch syndrome, but there's BRCA1 and 2. And that way you can be proactive.
This is just amazing.
Amazing.
Just amazing. What an incredible story. Amy, thank you so very much for being here. The book is called Daughter of Family G, a memoir of cancer, genes, love, and fate. Members of our studio audience, you're all going home with your own copy.